to start off with the regular season for the Rockets, there's no way to slant it in a way that isn't very positive for them as a whole. There's some things you could argue individually that weren't the greatest, but for the team itself, they had a 43.5 preseason over under. They demolished that. They had 8.5 additional wins. So that's a great success for the team as a whole. Getting, the 2 seed in a very tough West, that's a great sign for things to come. As for the playoffs, it affirmed a lot of what I believed was true about the Rockets going into the series, which is first and foremost, they just aren't ready yet. Even with them getting that number 2 seed, the difference in where they are as a regular season team versus as a playoff team is just very stark. So that is something that, you know, deflates the season a little bit. But as for the team as a whole, again, losing in 7 to a Warriors team that is as experienced as they come and had the two best players going into the series. I think Curry is a top 10 player. I don't think Butler is the most premier number two, but I think he's a darn good one. And I would definitely take both of them over any of the current Rockets in their current form, which I want to make clear. You know, I think maybe next year, even Amen Thompson could be better than Butler. Thompson improves a little bit offensively. I think that's definitely in play. And when you look at the playoff performances, I think that's kind of what we're banking on for the Rockets because Şengün, he was dominant on the boards. I will give him credit for that. But when you look at him as the player as a whole, I just think he leaves a lot to be desired. As a big, the most important things you can do, aside from obviously just score the ball efficiently, which he doesn't do, is play great defense. You are the anchor of the defense as a whole. He doesn't do that. And it also helps to stretch the court. He doesn't stretch the floor at all. I think he's very limited as a player. I think he's more geared towards the regular season than he is the playoffs because I just think he has too many weaknesses that can be attacked come playoff time. And his scoring, though it's above average, I wouldn't say it's much more than above average because, he can score almost 20 points a game just fine, but he's not doing so efficiently, especially for his position, where, centers are the most efficient players by far. And he's just not particularly good at scoring the ball like that. So I think this playoffs affirmed that you don't want to, entirely write someone off based on one series, especially when they're young into their career still with their first real playoff experience. Everybody is a bit rough to start out in the playoffs, at least compared to where they're going to end up. But Şengün, I just think he's shown throughout his career these deficiencies, and I don't know if he's going to be able to get past them. So I think that's one thing you can be a little bit pessimistic about with the Rockets. And I think that's kind of overarchingly the theme for them is great team, especially in the regular season. They do have so much depth, but the star power is just a bit rough because with Şengün likely being your best player, I think you have a very limited upside. The depth gives them a great floor because, especially in the regular season where you need lots of role players to contribute, that's, something they'll be able to ace. But playoff time when the minutes shorten or the lineups shorten and the starters get more minutes, it becomes a bit more pronounced that Şengün has limitations and isn't, I don't think, even a star level player. I think ideally he's going to be like the fourth best player on a championship team, maybe the third, but I just would rather have so many centers in the league over him, even guys that don't score as well as him. If they're going to play better defense and anchor the defense that way and be more efficient or space the floor, I like that more than him being, just a post up scorer that can score at an all right level. With that said, Jalen Green is actually even more of a pessimistic take, I think, because Green is just not developed at all. I do think when you look at him as a player from year one to now, the end of the postseason, he's not any fundamentally different. He is scoring at basically the same level. He's just as inefficient as he's ever been. He still isn't a good defender. He's improved on defense because he was unplayable defensively early on, but he's still not good. So I don't want to really hang my hat there. It's, still a problem for sure. So Green, I'm very low on. I think people are unreasonably high on him. And that's not even to say that people are always super high on him. I just think if you feel good about him basically at all, I think you're misguided. 20 points is nice. It's a good benchmark, but that 54% true shooting is very difficult. And, you know, the thing with him is just he's not contributing in other ways either. He's not a good playmaker. He, again, isn't a good defender. He's not really a profound rebounder in any way. I think these playoffs just showcased what he is as, someone that can score the ball but not efficiently, and someone that doesn't really contribute aside from that. The 5 rebounds was nice. It was, a sign of their dominance on the boards that, even a guard like him can get some boards because just as a team, they're very big, which is a nice plus. But, the 3 assists, the 1 turnover, that's not, anything. 13 points on 48% true shooting. That's very ugly. Especially too when you consider he had that 40-point game. I think it was about 40 points. It was a great, offensive explosion either way during the, series. And when you're talking a 7-game sample, one explosive game like that is going to really raise your numbers. So aside from that, he was actually even way worse than these stats would suggest. So I'm not high on Green at all. I think he's a negative asset, honestly. I wouldn't want him if I were, you know, trading a star away and getting a prospect. I would much rather have Thompson or, basically any of their young players aside from Green. I just don't see it with him. But enough about Green. There are more players to the team, of course. Fred VanVleet, he was a real positive throughout this series, as he does contribute in a variety of ways. And he was also much better scoring than Green was, much more efficient as well. 19 points on 63% true shooting. That's excellent. You're looking for about 57% for a guard. So 63% is awesome. Only 4 assists to 2 turnovers, but I think a lot of that was just guys weren't making their shots. So it could have been better than that, but even still, I'll take that assist to turnover ratio. And a lot of it he had to do on his own because just other guys weren't, able to contribute. And I think a lot of that too was they had the 2 bigs out there, and Thompson is another non-shooter. So the offense was very, very clustered together. So Van Vliet and, Brooks were the only guys that could space the court a lot of the time. So I think that's why the assists were not as great as you might hope for. But yeah, I'll take that performance from Van Vliet any day of the week. Just, you know, great all around, very good defender. Played Curry very tough. And Thompson did as well, which we'll get into next. I will say with Curry, just as we transition from Van Vliet to Thompson, and then we're going to get into Brooks as well. All of those guys did a good job on contributing to the defense of Curry. Curry finished the series averaging 24 points on 63% shooting, which is awesome efficiency, which is what Steph is known for. He was 1 point below regular season averages and 1 percentage point below true shooting efficiency. So, that's a huge win, even if it's, not much of a difference. For him to be worse than his regular season as a vet, getting more minutes in the playoffs, that's a huge win. Curry, definitely someone you could expect to rise come playoff time. And the Rockets did just an amazing job with him. So physical, not letting him get any open looks basically at all. He still made so many tough shots. That's where he got his points from. It wasn't from, bad defense by any stretch. Thompson did such an amazing job, as you would have expected. He is a great defender, honestly, one of the best in the league. And also, too, I just brushed over it. Butler was not, great by any stretch. He was actually a little bit worse than his regular season form. So playoff Jimmy might no longer be a thing, as I somewhat alluded to in the past. But it also just might be the Rockets have a great defense. Butler scored the same amount of points as he did in the regular season, but on 3 percentage points less efficiency. Didn't kill them on the boards at all. He had a great assist to turnover ratio, as he always does, but that's pretty much it as far as the Warriors offense goes. The Rockets defense was great. It was very stifling, and it made for, just inefficient offense from the Warriors, even as they do have, a pretty nice looking playoff lineup for offense. It's definitely not, the Warriors of old, but anytime you have Curry and Butler and then any semblance of life aside from that, like Podziemski, he's a solid piece, a little more defensive oriented, but a solid offensive player. Like, there was no contributions from anybody aside from Curry, really, that were of note. So great performance by the Rockets as a whole. So shout out to him, Van Vliet, and Brooks, another key contributor in that regard. So as we move to Thompson now, Thompson was pretty good on offense, especially for what we could expect for him. 16 points on 55% true shooting. Not great efficiency by any stretch, but I like that amount of points for him. And, the efficiency isn't unworkable, especially in a 7-game sample size. It might be a little bit lower than what it could be. So I'll take that any day of the week. 7 boards. He was very good on the glass. Basically, everybody was for the Rockets, as I mentioned before. Not much playmaking, but, I'll take an elite defender that's scoring the ball pretty well and rebounding very well any day of the week. And then for Brooks, he was a nice piece. He scored 12 on 59% true shooting. He had equal assists to turnovers, pretty much. So that's a bit rough. But overall, I thought he was a positive. He contributes to their great defense. And I think his play on the court, aside from that, was solid. I think, he did get into a little bit of trouble by getting Butler more engaged with his trash talking and getting into it with Green from time to time. But that's what you get with Brooks. That's not, anything unexpected. He's liable to, get in the head of the opponent or get the opponent to take it to another level. I don't mind that one bit with him. That's his game. So I'm fine with that. For Jabari Smith Jr., I wasn't impressed during the regular season, to be completely honest. I do think it's very hard when you're taken right after Paulo Banchero because Banchero looks like a budding superstar and Smith just isn't there yet, which is a bit worrisome because Banchero was always more of the project and Smith was somebody that seemed ready out the gate as like a 3 and D player. So Smith not just being fully fleshed out yet is a bit worrisome to me because that was something that was a positive for him entering the league. With Smith in the postseason, didn't get a ton of minutes, only got 7 points a game. Did so on 68% true shooting, so that's awesome. I don't know if it's a case of Ime not trusting him enough to Ime's fault. Udoka, does have his guys that he likes more than others. I think more than some coaches do. But it could be a sign that, Smith just wasn't ready for more minutes. I'm a bit questionable of that because he was so efficient, and I do think he brings good size and defense to a team that's predicated on that. So I think it's a bit odd. But, Smith, very one dimensional at the moment. Just, efficient scoring, some shooting from outside, and defense. Not really too much rebounding, even for his size. And just absolutely no playmaking. More turnovers than assists per game in this series. That's really rough. And also for Steven Adams, just masterful on the boards. It becomes a total, just mess on offense when he and Şengün are out there because neither can space the floor at all. But, they're getting every rebound that's up for grabs, seemingly. And, Adams does provide some nice paint presence. It is a bit problematic for the mobility on defense, especially again when the two bigs are out there, because neither can really switch all that proficiently. So you do kind of have to go into zone like they did a lot. But Adams, very, good at what he does. And I think if the role is to his favor, he can be a good contributor. I think the season is a major success, but I do think there's some worries with Şengün and Green being the lead guys at the moment. But the rotation around them is awesome. Genuinely one of the better in the league, hence them getting the number 2 seed in the stacked West. Those are my thoughts on the Rockets. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more basketball and football content.